The machines in room 314 beeped in a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat borrowed from something deeper than science, something suspended between memory and miracle. Outside, Denver's February snow pressed against the window like a soft, white hush. Inside, Clara Jennings, 33, sat curled in the same chair she'd claimed every evening for the past 11 months. The chair creaked with familiarity. Her hand, steady, slender, rested gently atop the cool fingers of the man she had grown to care for, even in silence. His name was Nathaniel Brooks, though the world had once known him as Nate Brooks, the tech mogul behind Brookline Systems. Billionaire, visionary, recluse, and now forgotten. Forgotten by the business pages that once hailed him, by board members who'd quietly replaced him, and by a world that moved on after the accident that put him in a coma. Clara wasn't here for headlines. She'd come because she needed to feel useful again. Because in the soft places between grief and recovery, people sometimes did irrational things, like transferring to a new city, starting over in a new hospital, and volunteering to care for a patient with no expected recovery. A man with no visitors, no next of kin, just a name, and a story that had stopped mid-sentence. She closed the copy of The Little Prince resting on her lap, the same copy her sister had adored. Her voice, warm and tired, had only just whispered the final line. "What is essential is invisible to the eye." "I think that's enough for tonight," Clara murmured, brushing a stray curl from Nathaniel's forehead. "You'd have liked that one, I think. Or maybe you already do." She rose, fingers lingering on his hand a second longer, then reached for the lamp switch. But then, a sound, a gasp, a flicker of movement. Clara froze. Nathaniel's fingers twitched beneath hers. Her breath caught, and then, his eyes. Slowly, like someone surfacing from the depths of a long-forgotten dream, Nathaniel opened his eyes. Green, clouded with confusion, then clearing, locking onto her face. Clara's mouth fell open, but no sound came. His lips parted. His voice was a hoarse whisper, cracked, rusted from disuse. "Elise?" The name hit Clara like a cold slap. She stood stunned, unmoving. Nathaniel's face contorted, overwhelmed with something between joy and disbelief. "Elise!" he cried out. "Oh my God, Elise!" And before Clara could back away, Nathaniel lurched upward with surprising strength, pulling her into a fierce embrace. His body trembled as he held her, bearing his face into her shoulder like a man drowning who had finally reached shore. "I thought I lost you," he sobbed. "I watched you fall. I saw it. I couldn't reach you. But you're here. You came back." Clara couldn't breathe. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "I'm not..." She tried to speak, but her voice dissolved. "I'm not Elise." He clung to her tighter, not listening, or maybe refusing to. The monitor beside them began to scream, a blaring alarm for a pulse that had skyrocketed. The door burst open. Nurses stormed in. "Mr. Brooks," one of them shouted, "you need to lie back. Easy now." Two male nurses moved in, carefully but firmly peeling Nathaniel away from her. His eyes were wild. His voice broke into a desperate plea. "Don't take her! She's alive! Don't take her away again!" Clara stumbled back, dazed, her breath shallow and uneven. "I'm not her," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I'm not Elise." One of the nurses stepped between them, shielding her. "Clara, you okay?" She nodded, or tried to, but her legs were jelly, her hands ice. She turned and fled the room, her shoes echoing down the corridor. Only when she was alone in the hallway did she collapse against the wall, sinking to the floor, gasping. Why did he call her that name? Why did it feel like the world had just cracked open? And why? Why did the name Elise sound like something more than just a coincidence? From inside the room, she could still hear him, his voice quieter now, broken, whispering again and again like a prayer. "Elise. Elise." Clara buried her face in her hands. She was trembling. Something had just begun, and it was so much bigger than she ever expected. Clara Jennings didn't sleep that night. After Nathaniel's shocking awakening and the name he whispered into her neck like a man clinging to a memory, Elise, Clara sat awake in her tiny apartment on Colfax Avenue, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above her. The city outside her window had gone still, quiet, indifferent. But inside, her thoughts screamed. The name had ripped something open, something buried. Elise wasn't just any name. It was her sister's name. Years ago, before Clara ever stepped foot in Denver, she and Elise Jennings had been inseparable. Sisters born just 18 months apart, raised in the windswept outskirts of Billings, Montana. Elise was the older one, the radiant one, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone turn. She was bold, fearless, intuitive in ways Clara never understood. If Clara was the planner, the thinker, the gentle one, Elise was the fire, and she had died on a rainy November evening. At least that's what the police report said. A truck, a slick intersection, instant death. Nothing anyone could have done. But even now, Clara remembered how wrong it all felt. Elise wasn't careless. She wasn't the type to miss a turn or speed in the rain. The whole thing had always felt off, especially when Clara listened again and again to the last voicemail Elise had left. Barely 30 seconds long, the audio shaky with static. "Clara, if anything happens to me, promise me you'll find Nate. He needs to know the truth. Don't trust." And then silence. It had cut off just like that. Clara never knew who Elise had meant not to trust. And Nate, Nathaniel Brooks, had seemingly vanished the same week Elise died. Back then, Clara had tried to reach him. Emails, calls, nothing. A few weeks later, the media whispered that the tech CEO had checked into a private rehab facility after a personal tragedy. Others said he was in Europe, or dead, or hiding. Clara had stopped following the speculation after a while. She had her own grief to survive, but something inside her had never let go. That was what made it so disturbing when she'd found herself standing in front of a hospital chart nearly a year later on her first day at Denver General. Room 314, Brooks, Nathaniel male, unresponsive, coma status, stable, admitted after vehicle rollover trauma 6 months prior. No visitors listed. At first, she thought it had to be a coincidence, but the birth date, the age, the name, it was too precise. And the moment she saw him, his still face beneath the tangle of wires and machines, she knew. It was him. The man Elise had whispered about before she died, the man she had loved, and clearly, the man who had once loved her back. Clara didn't tell anyone, not her supervisor, not her friends. She didn't even tell her parents, who had buried Elise with the polite grief of people trying to move forward. Clara wasn't ready to move forward. She wasn't even sure she wanted to. Instead, she requested to be assigned to Nathaniel's care. She claimed she was good with long-term patients, that she had a quiet presence, that she didn't mind silence. That much was true, but the rest, the real reason, it stayed buried like the voicemail in her old phone. Over time, her shifts became more than just medical routines. She found herself reading to him, talking to him, not about herself, but about Elise, about the garden Elise loved in their backyard, about the songs she always hummed while doing dishes, about the night sky she used to stargaze under, whispering facts Clara never remembered, but Elise never forgot. Clara never said Elise's name aloud, not even once, until Nathaniel had. Now the past had come roaring back, and it wasn't done yet. The next morning, Clara returned to room 314. Nathaniel was sedated again, gently eased into sleep by the staff to stabilize his vitals. He looked peaceful, nothing like the man who had wept in her arms less than 24 hours ago. Clara stood at the glass window watching him, her fingers pressed lightly against the cold surface. She didn't know what he remembered. She didn't know if he'd remember her at all, but one thing was clear now. He hadn't forgotten Elise, and Elise hadn't left without a reason. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, the same one Elise had mailed to her 2 weeks before the crash. She had never opened it until now. Inside, the first page read, "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, but something's not right. Nathaniel's in danger. Promise me you won't stop until he knows the truth." Clara closed her eyes. A chill ran down her spine. She whispered to no one, "I promise." 3 days passed before Nathaniel Brooks was lucid enough to sit upright without assistance. His muscles were weak from months of disuse. his voice barely more than a whisper. But his mind was beginning to sharpen. He remembered eyes, Elise's eyes. But they hadn't been Elise's, had they? When Clara Jennings stepped quietly into the room that third morning, he looked up at her, blinking as if trying to reconcile two truths at once. The woman who had held his hand during sleep and the ghost of the woman he'd lost. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. His voice cracked but was steady. "For the other night, I didn't mean to scare you." Clara gave him a small nod, walking closer. "You were confused. It's understandable. But I wasn't wrong, was I?" he asked. "You're not her, but you look like her." Clara's eyes met his. There was no turning back now. "I'm her sister," she said softly. "Clara Jennings. Elise was my older sister." The name hovered between them like a sudden gust of cold air. Nathaniel's expression collapsed into something raw, something hollowed out. "She never told me she had a sister." "She didn't talk much about family," Clara replied, "but we were close, and right before she died, she told me to find you." A silence fell, thick and heavy. "She's really gone?" he asked, though his voice already knew the answer. Clara nodded. "I always knew it wasn't just an accident," Nathaniel said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "She told me she felt watched, nervous, paranoid, I guess. I didn't take her seriously. I thought she was just stressed." "She wasn't paranoid," Clara said. She reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook, Elise's notebook, and handed it to him. "She gave this to me 2 weeks before the crash. I never opened it until the night you woke up." Nathaniel took the notebook with reverence. The binding was worn, the corners frayed, but her handwriting on the cover was unmistakable. He traced it with his fingers, like it was sacred. He opened to the first page and read the same line Clara had read aloud days earlier. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But something's not right. Nathaniel's in danger. Promise me you won't stop until he knows the truth." His breath caught. He turned the pages slowly, then faster. Elise's entries began casually. Notes about work, small worries about the company's financials. But as the pages progressed, the handwriting grew urgent, frantic. "I saw something I shouldn't have. Financial records that don't add up. Gregory Shaw, parking garage, envelope, 7th floor. I think Martin suspects I'm being followed. If something happens to me, he did it." Nathaniel stiffened. "Martin," he muttered. Clara leaned forward. "Martin who?" "Martin Hale, my CFO, my closest friend since undergrad. He was practically family. Elise never liked him." "She had reason not to," Clara said. "There's more." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small black USB drive. "This was tucked in the notebook. I didn't plug it in. Figured you should see it first." Nathaniel motioned for her to bring over his laptop from the corner table. With trembling hands, he inserted the drive. There were 3 files inside. One was labeled, "For Nathaniel." The other 2 were video files, time-stamped the week Elise died. Clara clicked the first video. It opened to grainy security footage of a dimly lit parking garage. 2 men stood near a black SUV. One handed the other a thick white envelope. "Pause it," Nathaniel said suddenly. Clara hit the space bar. The screen froze on the face of the man receiving the envelope. "That's Gregory Shaw," Nathaniel whispered. "Executive Vice President of Operations. Loyal to Martin. At least I thought so." "She mentioned him in the notebook," Clara confirmed. Nathaniel sat back, mind reeling. "Elise must have recorded this to bring to me. And then, she never made it to you," Clara said, finishing his thought. They played the second video. It was shakier, clearly taken from inside a moving car. Elise's voice was unmistakable. Angry, scared. "You shouldn't be following me. You need to back off, Elise. You're in over your head. Does Nathaniel know? He's not your concern anymore." Then static. The video cut off. Clara stared at the screen. Her hands were trembling now. She knew they were coming for her. Nathaniel's face was pale, jaw tight. "And I did nothing. I dismissed her. Told her we'd talk Monday." He clenched his fist. "She never made it to Monday." Clara touched his arm gently. "You didn't know. No one did." "But now we do," Nathaniel said, looking at her, Not with confusion anymore, but clarity. "And I won't let them get away with this." Clara nodded. "Neither will I." And there, in that sterile hospital room filled with ghosts, they sat together in quiet defiance. Elise had left them a trail, and now they were ready to follow it, step by step, into the truth. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. The hospital's rehab wing was quiet, dimly lit by a single lamp overhead. The sounds of 4 drips and soft hallway footsteps offered little distraction from the storm gathering in his chest. Elise had tried to warn him, tried to save him, and he had told her to wait until Monday, but Monday never came. Clara sat beside him, flipping through the last few pages of the notebook. Her voice was low even, but Nathaniel could feel the tremor behind it. "She wrote this the day before the crash," Clara said, pointing to the hastily scribbled lines. "Greg Shaw, envelope, level 7. Martin knows. He's watching me. I think they're planning something." Nathaniel closed his eyes. "She was right, and I was blind." "Not blind," Clara said gently, "just trusting." It was meant as comfort, but the guilt twisted sharper in his stomach. He opened the folder on his laptop labeled "For Nathaniel." Inside was a single letter, dated and signed in Elise's looping handwriting. Clara sat in silence as he read. "Nate, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it to you. I wanted to protect you from this, but maybe that was my mistake. You trusted the wrong man. I've seen things, accounts, transfers, board changes. He's building something behind your back, and if you find out too soon, you'll be next. Be careful. Trust no one except Clara. She's stronger than I ever was. I love you. I always did." Nathaniel folded the letter slowly, pressing it against his chest. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "It was Martin." "It had to be." Clara looked up. "Do you think he tried to kill you too?" Nathaniel gave a slow nod. "The night I crashed, I remember hearing a pop. Something snapped beneath the car. The brakes didn't respond. It wasn't the rain. I knew that from the moment it happened." "The investigation blamed the weather," Clara said. "Martin was the company," Nathaniel said bitterly. "He ran finance. He sat on the board. When I slipped into that coma, there was no one left to stop him." Clara's voice lowered. "Do you know what he did after?" Nathaniel turned to look at her. "He replaced board members, sold off patents, restructured divisions, and diluted your ownership stake until your name meant nothing." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The betrayal sat heavy between them. "We can still expose him," Clara said. "We have the videos, the notebook, the letter. It's not enough to bring him down yet, but it's a start." "I have someone I can call," Nathaniel said. "His name is Daniel Reeves, my old attorney. He's the only one I trusted who didn't take Martin's side after the crash. He walked away from the company the day Martin was voted in as interim CEO. Will he help?" "If he hears the full story," Nathaniel said, reaching for the hospital phone, "he won't just help, he'll fight." Nathaniel dialed the number from memory. After a few long rings, a gruff voice answered. "Reeves," the man said. "Daniel," Nathaniel said, his voice quiet but steady. "It's Nate." There was silence on the line. Then a whispered, "Jesus Christ, you're alive." "I need you," Nathaniel said. "There's something you have to see." 2 days later, Daniel Reeves walked into room 314 wearing a worn gray blazer and a face hardened by too many battles. His eyes softened slightly when he saw Nathaniel, thinner and paler than he remembered, but very much alive. Clara sat beside the bed, the USB drive and Elise's notebook neatly arranged on the tray table. They wasted no time. Daniel reviewed everything, pausing the videos, reading each note, asking precise questions as his lawyer's instincts kicked in. When he finally leaned back in the chair, he let out a slow breath. "I knew Martin was ambitious. I suspected he was cutting corners. But this is organized fraud, possibly conspiracy to commit murder." Nathaniel nodded grimly. "We can't go straight to the police," Daniel warned. "Not yet. This kind of case takes more than suspicion and a few shaky videos. We'll need to authenticate the footage, track the financial records Elise referenced, and, most of all, stay quiet. Martin's still powerful. "Then we start now," Clara said firmly, "before someone else gets silenced." Daniel gave her a long, appraising look. "You're her sister, all right." That night, as the wind howled across the snowy Denver skyline, a quiet war was declared. It wasn't loud, it wasn't public, but it had begun. Nathaniel Brooks wasn't just a recovering patient anymore. He was a man reclaiming his name, his company, and most of all, his truth. When the story broke, it did more than make headlines. It cracked the surface of an empire. The first article appeared on a quiet Monday morning. Whistleblower's death linked to executive corruption at Brookline Systems. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. News anchors reciting names with solemn urgency, headlines blaring across phone screens, and social media dissecting every frame of the leaked footage. But behind the noise, behind the press releases and hastily scheduled interviews, sat two people who had fought in the dark, alone for nearly a year. Nathaniel Brooks, former tech mogul turned ghost, now risen. Clara Jennings, the sister of the woman they'd tried to silence. Together, they had lit the match. Nathaniel watched the news from the hospital's media room. His wheelchair sat angled toward the television as footage replayed the key evidence. The grainy parking garage video of Gregory Shaw accepting an envelope. Elise's voice trembling with fear as she confronted a man in her final hours. And finally, an audio file, submitted anonymously by a whistleblower inside the company, recorded just 3 days before Elise's death. "She knows too much. I don't care how it's done. Just make sure she disappears, and make it look clean." Martin Hale's voice, clear, cold, unmistakable. There would be no spinning this, no quiet buyouts, no carefully worded denials. The truth had teeth now. 2 days later, Nathaniel stood on shaky legs with the aid of a cane in the Grand Regency Hotel's main ballroom. Just 2 years earlier, this same stage had hosted Brookline Systems' launch of its landmark AI software. Today, it hosted something far more important, a press conference for justice. Clara waited just behind the curtain. Daniel Reeves stood near the podium, briefing the gathered reporters. The atmosphere buzzed with tension, reporters murmuring, cameras poised, every eye turned toward the man they thought would never speak again. Nathaniel took the stage slowly, each step deliberate. His black suit hung looser on his frame, his face sharper, older, but his presence, quiet, resolute, filled the room. He gripped the edges of the podium and looked out at the crowd. "Good morning," he said, voice steady. "My name is Nathaniel Brooks. I come to you not as a CEO or businessman, but as a man who almost lost everything. My company, my identity, and someone I loved deeply because I trusted the wrong people." The cameras clicked rapidly. Some reporters lowered their pens, simply listening. "A year ago, my fiancée, Elise Jennings, died in what was ruled a tragic accident. Days later, I was hospitalized after my own vehicle's brakes failed. While I lay unconscious, a group of men I once called friends took over Brookline Systems. They sold off assets, erased board records, and covered up what Elise tried to expose." He paused, breathing through the emotion. "But Elise wasn't just a woman I loved. She was a voice of truth, and she knew they were hiding something. She left behind evidence, videos, documents, names, and because of her, and because of someone who believed in her when the world didn't, we now have that truth." His eyes drifted toward the back of the room, toward Clara, standing just out of view. Their eyes met. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "To Clara Jennings," he continued, voice gentler, "I owe my life, my clarity, and my courage. She's the reason I'm standing here, the reason justice will have its day." Applause rippled across the ballroom, soft at first, then swelling as the weight of his words settled. Later that day, Martin Hale was arrested in full view of the public, escorted from his private jet at the Denver airfield, handcuffed and silent. Gregory Shaw was placed on immediate leave pending criminal investigation. Brookline Systems announced a complete overhaul of its board, and shareholders demanded new leadership that prioritized integrity over profit. But for Nathaniel, it wasn't about corporate redemption. It was about Elise and Clara, and the promise that no one would silence her again. That evening, Nathaniel and Clara found themselves on the hospital rooftop. The city sprawled beneath them, lights flickering like quiet applause. They stood in silence, wrapped in the crisp Colorado air. "Did you mean it?" Clara asked softly, eyes on the skyline. "What you said about me in there?" Nathaniel looked at her, serious. "Every word." She lowered her eyes. "I thought I lost both of you. Elise, and you." "You didn't," he said. "You saved me." He reached for her hand slowly, giving her the space to decide. This time she didn't pull away. The press would forget the details. The headlines would fade. The internet would move on. But they would remember, not the war, not the betrayal, but the quiet, stubborn love that had brought them back from the edge. Justice had been served, and from what was broken, something whole had begun to take shape. The cemetery sat just west of downtown, tucked behind a row of sugar maples and iron fences weathered by time. There was no noise here, just wind moving gently through the trees and the faint trill of birdsong in the distance. It was the kind of quiet that didn't ask for anything, the kind that gave space to grieve. Clara and Nathaniel stood side by side, coats buttoned against the early spring chill. Their hands were intertwined, not for show, not out of need, but because it was the most natural thing in the world. Before them stood a headstone. Elise Jennings, beloved daughter, sister, and light. Her voice became our compass. At the base of the stone, Clara knelt down and gently placed a small, hardcover book tied with a pale blue ribbon. The title glinted in silver script under the soft sunlight. "Between Two Worlds, How My Sisters Saved Us Both." She would have rolled her eyes at the title, Clara whispered, smiling despite herself. Nathaniel chuckled quietly, and secretly loved it. They stood there for a long time, not speaking, just remembering. Elise wasn't just someone they had lost. She was the bridge that had brought them together. Her courage had outlived her, and now it would outlive them too. In words, in change, and in love that refused to die quietly. "I think she knew," Nathaniel said eventually, breaking the silence. "Knew what?" Clara asked, still looking at the book. "That I'd need someone after she was gone. Someone strong enough to keep me from disappearing completely." Clara's throat tightened. "You think she wanted you to meet me?" "I don't know if it was that deliberate," he said, "but I think she trusted you to carry what she couldn't anymore. And you did." Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. It showed the three of them, Elise in the middle, arms flung around both of them, laughing like the sky itself couldn't hold her joy. She placed it beside the book. "I used to think she was everything I wasn't," Clara murmured. "Brave, brilliant, magnetic. I always felt like I was standing in her shadow." Nathaniel looked at her gently. "She didn't cast shadows. She created light. And you're finally letting it shine through you?" Tears blurred Clara's vision, but they didn't sting. They warmed. She turned to face him, really see him, not as the man in the hospital bed, not as the CEO brought low by betrayal, but as the person he had become. Quiet, whole, awake. "Nathaniel," she said softly, her voice almost swept away by the breeze. "Do you ever wonder if what we have now is the beginning of something new, or just the continuation of something Elise started?" He smiled, warm and certain. "Maybe it's both. But I know one thing for sure. I don't want to lose you. Not again. Not in this life. Not in any." Clara reached up, touched his face with a tenderness that said everything her voice couldn't. Then, steady and sure, she said, "Then don't, because I'm not going anywhere." They stood there, arms wrapped around each other, while the city below continued its endless rhythm. Around them, the wind whispered softly through the trees, like Elise herself was nodding in approval. As they turned to walk back down the path, the sunlight broke through the clouds, casting long golden rays across the stone. Clara looked back once more. "Thank you, Elise," she whispered, "for everything." Nathaniel slipped his arm around her shoulders as they moved forward, step by step, heart by heart, into a world no longer defined by what they had lost, but by everything they had found. Between two worlds, love had found its way home, and this time, it was here to stay. Life rarely prepares us for the moments that break us: an unexpected accident, the death of a loved one, or betrayal from someone we once trusted. But the story of Nathaniel and Clara reminds us of something powerful. Pain is part of life, but how we move through it defines who we become. After losing her beloved sister Elise, Clara didn't just face grief, she faced doubt. She questioned her strength, her worth, her voice. But her quiet perseverance teaches us that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's sitting by someone's bedside for nearly a year, reading aloud into the silence, holding space for a miracle you're not sure will ever come. Nathaniel, once a brilliant CEO admired by millions, lost everything: his fiancée, his company, his sense of self. And yet in his most broken state, he found something far more valuable than power: truth, gratitude, and a love born not of image, but of understanding. What does this story ask of us? It reminds us that truth never really dies, no matter how long it's buried. That love can survive beyond grief if we allow it space to grow again. And that hope, even in its quietest form, is often what brings us home. Sometimes healing doesn't come through grand gestures or big speeches. It comes in whispered prayers, in notebooks left behind, in showing up day after day when no one is watching. In a world that often rushes us to move on, this story gives us permission to take our time, to mourn deeply, to love gently, and to rebuild slowly. Most of all, it reminds us that we don't walk through the dark alone. There is always someone, past or present, lighting the path forward, even if just one page at a time. So if you've lost someone, or feel like you're stuck between who you were and who you're becoming, take heart. The journey isn't over, and sometimes what feels like an ending is really the beginning of something new.